He did Eisenhower, he did Nixon, he did Kennedy. If you wanted a portrait, you had to come to his studio. Only for the presidents did you go to their...
If you compare the photographs, for instance, that he took of Lyndon Johnson with the portrait, you'll see that he took maybe 2 inches off Lyndon Johnson's chin. Somebody had done a portrait and Johnson said, well, he'd rather have a portrait by Norman Rockwell or something to that effect. Caused a small flap.
Well, Norman painted almost everybody. He painted so many of the movie stars, Frank Sinatra. He did do just about everybody, but he thought nothing of it, and I don't think the people in town did either, because there's so many famous people floating around in Stockbridge at all times that you just don't even think anything about it at all.
John Wayne came here because Norman, of course, was painting his portrait, and he stayed at the inn for about 3 or 4 nights, and he was just terrific. Absolutely wonderful. And one morning, it was a Sunday morning, I was coming down to the inn, and as I approached the inn, there was John Wayne going down the front steps of the Red Lion Inn, buckling on his 6 guns. And me without a camera.
You're such a modest, unassuming guy. Thing is, I had a lot of fun with him, and you know, like somebody told me once, he says, you know, Norman doesn't realize how famous he is. And I said, gee, it's a good thing he doesn't. I hope he never does. He was like a father and brother to me, so actually I was very glad to do anything I could for him. So.
The Norman Rockwell Museum was founded in 1969 as an effort really to save an old house, the old corner house on the main street of Stockbridge. And Norman and Molly Rockwell were 2 of the citizens who helped to save the building.
The previous owners had thought about tearing it down and putting up a supermarket or a gasoline station. So some very concerned citizens, Molly being one of them, bought it. And they decided that a good idea would be to make it into a museum using the things from the historical room. And while all this was going on, why, Norman said he had some pictures in storage up at the Berkshire Museum and whatnot, and he would be happy for us to use those. I can't remember whether it was his idea or what. But all of a sudden, what do you know? The only thing people wanted to look at were Norman Rockwell's pictures.
People in town, you know, that would come through and see the paintings sort of took it for granted, you know. Well, that's great, you know, these paintings are wonderful and everything, but why does the outside world think they're so important? Because it wasn't too many years that there were lines being formed all day long in the summer outside the museum, and the people would just stand there to come into the museum.
I don't recall anyone making a big deal about Norman Rockwell until after he died. It became like a phenomenon. All of a sudden, there was the Norman Rockwell Museum, and people were making a fuss over the Saturday Evening Post. And it's one of our jokes, yeah, it's a Norman Rockwell sort of town. I take pride in the fact I would tell people, yeah, well, I live in a Norman Rockwell sort of town, and they'd go, yeah, right, you.
No idea. I think he would be sort of flabbergasted and very pleased, and said thank you to everybody, and then gone back into the studio and started painting. So I don't think it would have made very much difference in the way he looked at things. He was a painter, and that's what he did and what he wanted to do, and that was his reason for going on.
He was a very powerful person, but in a very quiet way. There's a lot of people that can, you know, pound their fists and shout from the tallest mountain, and they won't make as much of an impact as Norman Rockwell did with a paintbrush.
To me, the strength of Rockwell has always been that he would produce good memories, not necessarily of anything that's real, but it's a good memory anyway. It brings back a feel or an aura.
He's part of our lexicon now. When we moved to Washington, Connecticut, there were 2 kids, a boy and a girl. It was a hot summer day, and they were both eating ice cream cones, and the ice cream cones were dripping on the steps before them, and there was a golden retriever licking up the remnants of the ice cream that was melted. And I said, Norman Rockwell painted this picture. He painted the town green.
And people say that. This is a Norman Rockwell moment. I've heard that spoken. This is a Norman Rockwell moment. This is. We're talking about him.
To a certain extent, it's strange because, you know, now he's so much more than my father. And so it's there's a sort of disjunct here.
A human being is not a walking value. A human being is, you know, is moving. It's just, so I'm just saying that my grandfather, as representing sort of a time period, certain values, is one thing. My grandfather, as a human being who was my father's father, is something entirely different.
A few years after the fact, and he still looks the same.
Myself and my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, my great-great-grandfather, my great-great-grandfather.
Yeah.
All the work that Norman created in his lifetime has been preserved in one form or another. And it has a life that carries on and gives, continues to give from one generation to the next. And if that isn't immortality, I don't know what it is.
All my family, there's not a family member anywhere that doesn't have a Saturday Evening Post signed by me on their wall somewhere in one of their rooms. And over the years, it's been something that's been mentioned in a number of things about me as people have asked, well, tell me the story of your life. And it's the highlight. It's one of the highlights of my life.
53 years later.
You know, 13, I was being a hotshot, you know, I'm posing for Norman Rockwell. Centerfold of Look magazine, look out. Now it means heck of a lot more to me today.
People love it, and when they find out you're in a Rockwell painting, it's another fun discussion and people enthusiastic about Rockwell.
You go into somebody's house and you don't know these people very well, and you sit down and all of a sudden you realize that your picture is over their dining room table. And you say, I wonder if I say anything, or well, maybe I'll just let it go by.
He was just a neighbor. And I knew I was posing, you know, had no idea what it was for. And now I can't believe I'm a part of history. It's exciting, it's very humbling. So that's the kind of memories I have, is just a slow, lazy day, helpful day. I mean, that's what Mr. Rockwell was all about. He was helpful, he was kind, he was sincere, and he was a townsperson.
From the highway you can't see the courthouse or the green. Small town life for most is just a postcard or a dream. So long, Main Street.
I don't think they understand just how important we are, do they, Dick?
No, my wife keeps telling me
yes,
all the time.
I don't think they understand how important we are to American art.
That's right, exactly. Without us, I mean, that's the way it would be.
Yeah.